Update is at 8:30. Chicago's Morning Answer continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. So now all of those who were telling us how probing and exacting, rigorous Joe Biden was are getting asked, you're sure you're sticking with that story? You never saw any evidence of mental decline, including Christopher Wray. FBI director was asked that the other day in that congressional hearing, talking mainly about the FBI investigation and the Secret Service. And Wray said that it's not something I observed during my interactions with him, which were uneventful and unremarkable. Trump took to Truth Social and said of that comment by FBI Director Wray, if that is the case, Director Wray should resign immediately from the FBI and stop sweet-talking Congress every time he goes up, which he loves to do, because anybody can see that Joe Biden is cognitively and physically challenged, and if you can't see that, you sure as hell can't be running the FBI, unless that is you want to illegally raid Mar-a-Lago. Wray has to resign, and now for lying to Congress. Well, I suppose the good news, at least from my perspective, is if Trump is elected on November 5th, which I believe he will be, then I don't think we're going to have a real delay in replacing the FBI director like we had the first go-around with Comey.
I mean, we could do a whole topic. Who would you fire first? But he's got to get there first.
James Gagliano is a retired FBI supervisory special agent and doctoral candidate in Homeland Security at St. John's. He also serves as mayor of the village of Cornwall-on-Hudson in New York, and he's on the board of directors of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund as well. James Gagliano, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Dan and Amy, thanks for having me. How's everybody doing?
Good. What do you think about Trump's latest call, frankly, for Christopher Wray to resign? There's so many reasons. The latest being belief that he's being less than forthright about his interactions with Joe Biden.
All right. Well, Dan, since you asked me that, I'll ask you this. Do you want me to weigh in as I never use the term expert, as a law enforcement analyst, which I'm happy to do, 25 years in the FBI, as you pointed out, or as the sitting mayor of an upstate village in New York State? Because unfortunately, in today's day and age, and this wasn't the case, less than a decade ago, politics unfortunately intertwines itself with law enforcement. We've certainly seen that, across the past decade. And I preface it by saying this. I was a huge supporter of Director Wray. There have only been 8 Senate-appointed FBI directors in the history of the FBI. That's 1908 until today. We're celebrating our 116th anniversary just a couple of days ago, and I served under 4 of those 8. Now you're going to say, well, how's that possible, 116 years? J. Edgar Hoover was at the helm for 48 years, across,
Right.
8 different presidents. So here's where I stand on this. Director Wray is a tough job, and trust me, I've watched him be, banged up and bullied on Capitol Hill. And obviously you're referencing his appearance before the Senate Oversight and Accountability Committee. And I thought he provided more clarity, gave better answers, didn't hide behind, ongoing investigation. I cannot speak to that. Ongoing investigation, I'm sorry, I'll have to get back to you on that. I was disappointed in a couple of things that he said. He did mention as an aside, and it didn't really get much play in the press until much later, that the president may not have been hit in the ear with a ballistic round, with a bullet from the young man who fired at him 8 times, and it might have been something else. And today, and I'll share this with you and your listeners, because it's a brand new statement out from the FBI, and it says, this statement is attributable to the FBI. Since the day of the attack, the FBI has been consistent and clear that the shooting was an attempted assassination of former President Trump, which resulted in his injury. And it goes on for a bit, and he says that the FBI's shooting reconstruction team continues to examine evidence from the scene, including bullet fragments, and the investigation remains ongoing. So, of course, in the political realm, former President Donald Trump is going to use that to make hay, to say, hey, look, he said that he couldn't tell whether or not President Biden might have cognitive ability issues right now, and how crazy is that? Because we've all seen it. And then he's also saying this, that maybe I didn't get shot by a bullet, that actually it was something else. So FBI director's in a tough spot. I appreciate cabinet members and obviously the directors of federal law enforcement. They have a tough needle to thread. They are political appointees, but the American public expects them to be nonpartisan and apolitical. So how's that for threading the needle on my end, on the FBI part and on the political part?
Well,
Do you think President Trump was shot?
I do. Now, having said that, and let me make this patently clear, I am talking to nobody who's engaged in the investigation. I do not have inside information. Nobody is leaking information to me. As a member of the media, I write and I speak in media realms, and as a retired FBI agent and a sitting political figure, I don't have any inside information. Does it appear that there could have been something else that could have struck him? I don't think so from what I've seen, but I am not involved in the investigation, and I always caution that we wait until all the details and facts come out.
all right. So here's the problem with Wray, and being somewhat more forthright in this investigation into the failed assassination attempt than say he has been about January 6th. There's not really. He didn't really provide detail, and to defend him a bit, he didn't get pressed to provide sort of the structure of how the investigation is going to proceed the way that he should have been. And I mean, just going back, I mean, it's not just his, sort of bull jive about what he did or did not observe about Biden. I mean, it seems pretty, unless he was, getting him at just that sweet spot every morning when they visited. I don't know. But he still won't tell us anything about January 6th. He still has he has no idea if there were FBI agents on the ground January 6th, how many there were. This is one of the most egregious efforts at misinformation, a favorite word, because of course he has to know, or he can easily get access to that information. He's just not going to tell us. And the treatment now, especially the disparate treatment of so many people prosecuted on January 6th, it demands a lot more accounting from Christopher Wray than we've gotten. And it's sort of like that in particular, in addition to other massive FBI failures and questionable conduct, the raid at Mar-a-Lago, which Trump mentioned, the raid of that Pennsylvania dad who was protecting his son peacefully outside an abortion clinic, basically, and charges were dropped and so forth. They do the SEAL Team 6 raid, ridiculous. But January 6th in particular, I mean, that to me, that colors everything else that we hear from Wray, because he has been so, maybe dishonest is too strong a word, but unforthcoming, knowingly not telling us information that he has.
Dan, strong statements, and here's what I'll say. I appreciate where you're coming from. I don't necessarily disagree with you. The three of us have never met personally, but we've shared many conversations across the past year or so in regards to FBI actions. And let me say this. The FBI director is directed to, under the Constitution, and the Supreme Court of the United States have upheld this, that under Article 1, Section 8, which is enumerated powers, and I'm doing this off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure I'm right, and Article 2, Section 2, and maybe 4, the U.S. Congress has direct, let me say that again, direct oversight of the FBI. And that's why they can call the director up on the Hill anytime they choose to. Now, here's what frustrates me, and we saw this with the former director of the Secret Service, Director Cheadle, and we see this with the current Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas. When you are asked to go up on the Hill, to be forthright and transparent, you get your butt up there. These folks have refused to do that when asked, claiming scheduling concerns, and had to be brought up via subpoena.
Right.
Now, that offends me as a U.S. citizen. That offends me as a former FBI agent. Having said that, to your point about January 6th, I don't believe any of the conspiracy theories, and here's why. And I have been the most critical media guy on the FBI, an organization I bleed blue and gold, spent half of my life in, 25 years, and bleed blue and gold. But here's my problem with the conspiracy theories. Benjamin Franklin said it best. 3 people can keep a secret when 2 of them are dead. And when you bring somebody up like the director and you ask him questions in open session, you demand transparency, he does have to be concerned about sources and methods and violating other people's Fifth Amendment rights. So here's what Congress should do. Let's do it in private.
But it was fine. That'd be a start. But I mean, but just to be clear, I didn't advance a conspiracy theory. The question is, were there FBI agents on the grounds on January 6th, and if so, how many? He was asked that question. He was asked for name. He wasn't asked for name, rank, and serial number. He wasn't asked what did John Smith do and what did Joe Jones do and stuff. Just acknowledge that there was an FBI presence there, and then if there's stuff that we have to talk about in private to get details, fine. But he wouldn't even do that.
Okay, let me clear that up. So as a guy who has worked undercover operations in the FBI for many years, mostly targeting organized crime figures, gangbangers, violent criminals, that kind of stuff. For the FBI to conduct an undercover investigation, it does require the Department of Justice's sign off. And there's a thing called the Attorney General Guidelines that the FBI has to adhere to, because remember, the Attorney General is the FBI director's boss. So the Attorney General is in charge of the FBI and oversight.
Yeah, but he didn't say Merrick Garland won't let me tell you.
No, but I don't think, but that'd be passing the buck. Here's what I think. If you ask me, Jimmy, you're FBI director for the day, you're called up on Congress, be honest, open, transparent, allay the American public's fears, righteous fears that the FBI might have somehow been involved in what happened on that awful day on January 6th. And here's what I would say. I'm not going to tell you how many agents we had in the crowd. That is not righteous. And what does that do if I say we had 13 agents assigned, we put them on these particular posts? Because if they do that to Congress, if they share that information with Congress, somebody, whether it's on the right or the left, is going to rush out to the cameras, immediate following, and go, here's how the FBI conducts its operations. That's the concern. It's the leaks from Congress. They're not – look, I'm a sitting mayor. If I want to talk about the conduct of the village of Cornwall and Hudson, I can talk to the press, and the only people that can fire me are my constituents. He is different. He is supposedly in an apolitical position. He's supposed to be operating, following the evidence, bereft of fear, favor. But when you're called up on the Hill, Dan, I would just argue everything becomes political. And I say this to you. I'm as appalled as you are by what happened on January 6th, from the clowns that perpetrated what they did and from the overreaction and the heavy-handedness of the U.S. government, who allowed cities to be burned and police precincts to be immolated and firebombing federal courthouse in Portland, and those folks were not held to the same standard. So we're on the same sheet of music. It's just, I would argue that giving stuff to Congress without that trust and security makes that position a tough position to deal in, and I'll give the director there the benefit of the doubt, and I don't do it too often.
On Secret Service, I know the FBI investigation is focused on the would-be assassin, not so much Secret Service, but here again, it's not like we don't have mission creep and blurred lines between agencies and frankly, congressional committees, since now we have a bipartisan congressional committee that's going to investigate. But do you think it would be righteous, to borrow your word, if Christopher Wray communicated whatever he learns about Secret Service planning and decision-making on that day to a congressional committee, or to any other proper authority when it comes to getting a full accounting of that failed assassination attempt?
All right, before I compliment you, and people are going to think that I'm just doing this because you asked me to join, let me say the direct answer to that is Absolutely. Now, having said that, I appreciate that you made the distinction, and you obviously watched the hearing the other day, because in that session, and this is what people don't understand, the director made it clear the FBI's oversight of this investigation is not the security piece. It is simply to find out who did this. And we obviously know that now. What weaponry was used? How did the breaches happen? Were there other co-conspirators? Is there another cell involved? Was this a hate group? Are there any other threats to the American public or to President Trump and other sitting elected officials? So he made that very clear, because people are blurring the lines. Now, having said that, and I worked on protection details for 3 sitting attorney generals, Attorney General Reno, Attorney General Alberto Gonzales, and Attorney General John Ashcroft across 2 different presidential administrations. I also protected 2 FBI directors, Director Louis Freeh and Director Robert Mueller. The business is a tough business. It's one of those where there can never be a failure. You can't be a baseball player and hit 250 and stick around in the Secret Service because, well, you know, at least a quarter of the folks that I protected were okay. This was an egregious failure. The president has called for an independent inquiry. The Secret Service and the OIG for the Department of Homeland Security, because remember, the Secret Service is not part of the Department of Justice. They answer under the Department of Homeland Security, and the FBI are all conducting concurrent investigations. Yes, this was a colossal failure. I've done protection details. This was a colossal failure, but I think that we have to await the investigation results to come out, and the FBI is on track to unravel and to figure out how this happened from the perpetrator's perspective, and the Secret Service and the independent inquiry and the Department of Homeland Security's inquiry are going to be related to the X's and O's in tactical response and protection.
You did a protective detail for Janet Reno?
Yes. I did it immediately following the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, when the FBI director at the time, Louis Freeh, said we're going to bump up security for her. And I was a young SWAT agent in the Brooklyn, Queens office of the FBI, and I got yanked down to D.C. to do it.
Can you tell us if she did or did not like Will Ferrell's impersonation of her on Saturday Night Live?
You know, I'm glad that you're ending this with a little bit of humor.
Well, she did appear with him eventually.
Yeah,
She wore the same blue dress and pearls.
I thought he was spot on. That was me.
I'll say this: of the 3 attorney generals that I helped protect in small capacities, she was the one that I most enjoyed working for and was the most pleasant. I'll just leave it at that.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. James Gagliano is a retired FBI supervisory special agent, as you've just heard. He's a doctoral candidate in Homeland Security at St. John's. He's the mayor of the village of Cornwall-on-Hudson in New York, and he's on the board of directors of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund. He's a busy guy. James Gagliano, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
Dan and Amy, thanks for having me.
Yeah, have a great weekend. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Come on with this, people. Move it!
Did you really think you could make that company deliver yourself?
Oh, I cannot handle any more traffic.